Sometimes the person who saves your life is the one you were never supposed to reach. Rain slid down the cracked apartment window in slow, crooked lines as Claire Monroe sat on the kitchen floor with her laptop, glowing against the darkness of her tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn. The microwave clock blinked 2:41 a.m. in faded green numbers while unpaid bills covered the floor beside her sock-covered feet. A final eviction warning rested near an empty cup of instant noodles, its bright red stamp impossible to ignore. Her chest still burned from what happened earlier that evening. She could still hear the laughter in the conference room. If Claire moves any slower, we'll finish this campaign before she finishes a single spreadsheet. Her manager had joked while the entire department looked down at their laptops, pretending not to hear. Claire had smiled anyway. She always smiled. That was the exhausting part. Smiling when her stomach hurt from anxiety. Smiling when she skipped dinner 3 nights in a row to save money. Smiling when people interrupted her before she could finish a sentence. Outside, a siren echoed through the wet New York streets while thunder rolled somewhere far above the city skyline. Claire rubbed her tired eyes and looked back at the blinking cursor on her resignation email. To anyone else, it was just another corporate goodbye. But to her, it felt like admitting defeat. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as tears collected quietly in her eyes. "I don't think I can survive this place anymore," she typed slowly. The words made her stop breathing for a second. Honest words always did. She leaned back against the kitchen cabinet, staring at the sentence glowing on the screen. Her mother used to tell her that exhausted people became invisible first, then forgotten. Claire finally understood what that meant. Every morning she entered a 30-story glass building filled with thousands of employees. Yet somehow nobody ever really saw her. Nobody noticed the panic attacks inside bathroom stalls. Nobody noticed she stayed late every night fixing mistakes made by other people. Nobody noticed she had stopped laughing months ago. Her phone buzzed. Softly beside her, another message from her landlord. "Need payment by Friday." Claire closed her eyes. Her chest tightened again. Then she kept typing. She wrote about the endless overtime, the cruel jokes disguised as office culture, the way people looked terrified every time upper management walked through the floor. And finally, the sentence that hurt the most to write. People only care when someone collapses in public. Silence filled the apartment after she finished. Only rain. Only the hum of the refrigerator. Claire wiped her face quickly, embarrassed even though nobody was there to see her cry. Then she typed the company HR address from memory, hit send, and let the laptop fall shut beside her. She never noticed the tiny typo in the email address. One missing letter. One wrong destination. Across Manhattan, high above the glowing city streets, Billionaire CEO Adrian Whitmore sat alone inside his dark penthouse office overlooking Central Park. His half-finished whiskey sat untouched beside stacks of financial reports while the storm reflected across the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. He had been reviewing another corruption complaint inside his company when a new email notification appeared on his screen. Subject line: "I don't think I can survive this place anymore." Adrian frowned slightly before opening it. Then he started reading. And unlike everyone else in Claire Monroe's life, he didn't stop. Adrian Whitmore reread the email 3 times before finally leaning back in his chair. Outside his penthouse windows, rain blurred the Manhattan skyline into streaks of silver and gold, but his eyes stayed fixed on the glowing words on his screen. People only care when someone collapses in public. The sentence sat heavy in his chest. Strange how 12 words from a stranger could cut deeper than every boardroom argument he had endured all year. He loosened his tie slowly and stood from his desk, walking toward the massive windows overlooking Central Park. 36 years old. Billionaire founder of Whitmore Global Media. Featured on magazine covers. Feared in meetings. Admired by investors. Yet somehow, in the silence of his penthouse office at nearly 3 in the morning, he felt more exhausted than the woman who wrote the email. Adrian had spent months hearing whispers about the company culture deteriorating beneath upper management. Human resources complaints disappearing. Employees quitting unexpectedly. Anonymous reports of burnout. But every executive meeting ended the same way. Higher profits. Stronger projections. Smiling presentations hiding rotten foundations underneath. He had stopped trusting reports a long time ago. Numbers lied easily. Exhausted people did not. Adrian returned to his desk and scrolled back to the top of Claire Monroe's message again. Her words were messy in places, emotional, typed through obvious frustration, but they felt real in a way corporate language never did. He noticed small things the longer he read. She apologized twice for sounding dramatic. She defended coworkers who were struggling. She blamed herself even while describing humiliation. That told him more about her than any employee profile ever could. His eyes stopped on another line near the bottom. I used to think hard work made people matter. Something tightened painfully in his chest. His father used to say almost the same thing. 30 years building a company. 70-hour work weeks. Endless flights. Endless stress. Then one winter morning, Adrian found him unconscious inside his office at the age of 58. The company survived. The stock recovered. But his father never truly came home again after that. Adrian closed his eyes briefly before opening a confidential employee database on his laptop. Claire Monroe, age 27, marketing support coordinator. For years with the company. No disciplinary record. Excellent performance reviews until 6 months ago, when productivity comments suddenly shifted. Emotionally distracted. Less engaged in meetings. Needs stronger energy. Adrian frowned at the screen. Those comments sounded less like evaluations and more like warnings from people who never bothered asking why someone was drowning. His assistant would arrive in 4 hours. The board expected him in Chicago by noon. Investors were waiting for answers about the upcoming merger. None of it mattered right now, because somewhere in Brooklyn, a woman was sitting alone believing nobody noticed she was breaking apart. Adrian stared at her employee ID photo on the screen. Blonde hair pulled back loosely. Nervous smile. Tired eyes trying too hard to look professional. Invisible. That was the word that came to him immediately. Invisible people always fascinated him because he understood them better than anyone realized. Billionaires became invisible too eventually. People stopped seeing the human being and only reacted to the money, the headlines, the reputation. Maybe that was why Claire's honesty unsettled him so much. She wrote like someone with nothing left to gain. Adrian glanced once more at the storm outside before making a decision that surprised even him. He printed the resignation email carefully, folded the pages once, and slipped them into the inside pocket of his coat. Then he quietly said to the empty office, "I think somebody should have listened sooner." Claire Monroe woke up late the next morning with dried mascara beneath her eyes and sunlight cutting through the thin blinds of her apartment like sharp white lines. For a few peaceful seconds, she forgot about the resignation email entirely. Then her phone buzzed beside her pillow. 3 missed calls from work. 1 voicemail from her manager. Her stomach dropped instantly. She sat up too fast, nearly knocking over the stack of unpaid bills beside the couch she sometimes slept on when anxiety kept her awake. The voicemail started playing before she could stop it. "Claire, where are the Henderson revisions? The client presentation is in less than an hour. Call me immediately." No concern. No kindness. Just pressure. Always pressure. Claire stared at the ceiling for a moment, exhausted before the day had even started. Outside, New York moved as usual. Car horns. Sirens somewhere downtown. Construction noise echoing between buildings. Millions of people rushing through another morning while she struggled just to breathe normally. She dragged herself into the bathroom and stared at her reflection beneath the harsh fluorescent light. Pale skin. Dark circles under tired blue eyes. She looked older than 27. Her mother would have told her to call in sick, to rest. But rest felt dangerous when rent was overdue and her savings account barely held $83. By 8:15 a.m., Claire squeezed into a crowded subway car heading toward Midtown Manhattan, gripping the metal pole while strangers scrolled through phones and avoided eye contact. Across from her, a young intern from another department recognized her and smiled nervously. "Morning, Claire." "Morning, Sophie." Sophie looked barely 22 and always carried too many notebooks against her chest like armor. Claire noticed the girl seemed upset. "You okay?" Sophie hesitated before whispering. "Mr. Landon yelled at me in front of everyone yesterday. I think I messed up the campaign files." Claire already knew what probably happened. Somebody higher up made a mistake, and the youngest employee became the easiest target. That was how Whitmore Global worked lately. Claire gave her a small, reassuring smile anyway. "You are smarter than you think, Sophie. Do not let stressed people convince you otherwise." The girl's shoulders relaxed just slightly. Tiny moments like that were the only reason Claire still survived the office some days. helping other exhausted people feel less alone. 40 minutes later, the giant glass tower of Whitmore Global rose above Manhattan like something cold and untouchable. Claire usually felt nervous entering the building. Today she only felt numb. Inside the elevator, employees straightened jackets and practiced fake enthusiasm before the office swallowed them whole. Claire stepped onto the 23rd floor and immediately sensed tension in the air. Conversations stopped too quickly. People looked at computer screens too intensely. Then her manager's voice sliced through the silence. "Claire, conference room. Now." Every head turned as she followed him inside. Daniel Landon shut the glass door harder than necessary before tossing a folder onto the table. "Do you understand how close you came to embarrassing this department?" Claire blinked in confusion. "What?" The Henderson revisions were incomplete. Claire opened the folder quickly. Her chest tightened. Immediately. Those were not her edits. Someone changed the files after she left last night. "I finished those before 8, she said quietly. Daniel laughed once under his breath. "You know what your problem is? You always have an excuse instead of solutions." Claire felt heat crawl into her face as humiliation settled over her again. The same humiliation. Every single week. "I stayed here until almost 10, she whispered. "I know." His expression stayed cold. "Maybe next time stay until midnight." A few seconds later, Daniel walked out, leaving the conference room door partially open. Claire stood there alone, fighting tears she refused to let anyone see. Then her computer notification chimed from outside. One new email. Sender unknown. Subject line, "I read your resignation letter." Claire stopped breathing. Claire stared at the email notification while the noise of the office faded into a dull blur around her. Her fingers tightened slowly around the edge of the conference table as her heartbeat thudded painfully in her chest. For one terrifying second, she thought human resources had somehow intercepted her resignation before she could explain the mistake. The sender name showed only one word. Adrian. No company title. No department. Just Adrian. Her mouth suddenly felt dry. She glanced nervously through the glass walls of the conference room to make sure Daniel Landon was not nearby before opening the message. "You accidentally sent this to my private inbox last night. I believe we should talk. Would 6 tonight work for you?" Claire blinked several times. Private inbox? Her exhausted brain struggled to process what she was reading. She scrolled down quickly and noticed the email signature underneath. Adrian Whitmore. Her stomach dropped so fast it made her physically dizzy. Founder and Chief Executive Officer. Claire immediately looked around the office floor as if someone might suddenly appear and arrest her for accidentally emailing the billionaire owner of the entire corporation. Her breathing became shallow. Oh no. Oh no. She remembered typing the human resources address while half crying on her kitchen floor. One wrong letter. That was all it took. She almost deleted the email instantly, pretending none of this happened, but another notification appeared before she could move. "You are not in trouble." Claire stared at the screen in disbelief. Somehow, those 5 words unsettled her even more. Because nobody powerful ever reassured employees unless something serious was happening. The rest of the workday passed like a foggy dream. Daniel barked orders at people. Phones rang endlessly. Meetings came and went. Claire barely heard any of it. Every few minutes, she reopened Adrian's message just to confirm it was real. By 5:30, Manhattan outside the office windows glowed orange and gold beneath the fading sunset. Employees hurried toward elevators carrying expensive bags and tired expressions, while Claire remained frozen at her desk, pretending to organize spreadsheets she could no longer read properly. Sophie approached quietly with her notebook still clutched against her chest. "Are you okay?" Claire forced a weak smile. "Long day." Sophie hesitated before lowering her voice. "I heard Mr. Landon blaming you for the Henderson account earlier. Everybody knows it was not your fault." Claire looked down at her desk. "That almost makes it worse." Sophie frowned softly like she understood more than most people did. Then she whispered, "You are the nicest person here, Claire. I hope you know that." The words hit harder than Claire expected, because kindness inside Whitmore Global often felt invisible too. 30 minutes later, Claire stood outside the towering corporate building gripping her coat tightly against the cold evening wind. Yellow taxis rushed past rain-soaked streets while giant digital billboards flickered overhead. New York looked beautiful from a distance. Up close, it mostly felt lonely. Her phone buzzed again. There is a small coffee shop across from Bryant Park. 7 p.m. If you would still prefer not to meet, I understand. Claire looked up slowly toward the massive glass tower behind her. Somewhere high above those glowing windows sat one of the richest men in the country asking to meet a woman whose checking account could barely survive the week. None of it made sense. She should have gone home immediately. Sensible people would have ignored the message entirely. But something about the email felt strangely human. Not corporate. Not threatening. Human. At exactly 6:58 p.m., Claire pushed open the door to the coffee shop. Warm air carrying the smell of espresso and cinnamon wrapped around her instantly, while soft jazz music floated through the crowded room. She scanned the tables nervously until her eyes landed on a tall man sitting alone near the back window wearing a dark charcoal coat. He looked up the moment she entered. Calm gray eyes. Tired expression. Expensive watch catching the dim light. Adrian Whitmore stood as she approached, and for the first time in years, one of the most powerful men in New York looked genuinely uncertain about what to say next. Claire suddenly became aware of everything at once. The warmth of the coffee shop, the sound of steaming milk behind the counter, the soft clatter of ceramic cups, and the fact that Adrian Whitmore, one of the most recognizable billionaires in New York, was standing in front of her like a man unsure whether he deserved to be there. "Hi," he said quietly. Claire nodded once, gripping the strap of her bag tighter. "Hi." Adrian gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Thank you for coming." His voice surprised her. Calm. Low. Tired in a strangely familiar way. Not polished like television interviews. Not cold like corporate meetings. Human. Claire sat carefully while trying not to look nervous. The table between them suddenly felt too small. She noticed his coat was still damp from the rain outside, and a folded stack of papers rested beside his untouched coffee cup. Her resignation letter. Adrian followed her eyes and slowly slid the pages closer to himself. "I almost did not read it," he admitted. "My assistant filters most private emails before I ever see them." Claire looked down immediately, embarrassment flooding her face again. "I am really sorry. I typed the wrong address. I was exhausted and you do not need to apologize." She looked back up. Adrian's expression remained steady, but there was something heavy behind his gray eyes. "Actually, I think I should apologize." Claire frowned softly, unsure if she heard him correctly. Billionaires were not supposed to apologize to people like her. "Why?" Adrian leaned back slightly, studying her for a moment before answering. "Because I built a company where someone felt that invisible." Silence settled gently between them while jazz music drifted through the room. Claire did not know what to say. For years, she imagined people at Adrian Whitmore's level lived inside a completely different universe. Private jets, penthouse parties, perfect lives protected from ordinary problems. Yet sitting across from him now, she noticed how exhausted he looked too, like someone carrying something heavier than success. Adrian glanced down at the resignation pages again. The line about collapsing in public. His jaw tightened briefly. That stayed with me. Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks. I did not mean for anyone important to read that. Maybe someone important needed to. The words landed softly between them. Claire looked away first. Outside, the rain continued falling across Bryant Park while headlights reflected off wet streets in ribbons of gold and white. Inside the coffee shop, people laughed quietly, students studied at corner tables, and life moved normally around them while something strange unfolded at their small table near the window. Adrian finally asked the question that mattered most. Was everything in the letter true? Claire almost answered automatically with the safe version. The corporate version. The version people expected. It is fine. I was emotional. I overreacted. But something about the way Adrian waited stopped her. He was listening differently than most people did. Not impatiently. Not strategically. Actually listening. Claire swallowed hard before speaking honestly for the first time in months. I think everybody at that company is tired. Adrian stayed silent. Some people are just better at hiding it. She stared down at her hands while continuing quietly. Nobody wants to look weak. So everybody smiles through panic attacks and skipped meals and 70-hour work weeks because they are scared of becoming replaceable. Adrian's eyes never left her face. Claire gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Sorry, I probably sound dramatic. No, Adrian said immediately. You sound honest. The simplicity of the answer caught her off guard. Then his phone buzzed loudly against the table, breaking the moment. Adrian glanced at the screen briefly before silencing it without reading the message. Claire noticed the name flashing across it. Board chairman. She suddenly remembered exactly who he was again. Not just a tired man in a coffee shop. A billionaire running one of the largest media corporations in America. Someone powerful enough to change thousands of lives with a single decision. Adrian noticed her expression shift instantly. Claire, I should go, she said quickly, standing too fast. No. The word came out sharper than he intended. Adrian softened his voice immediately. Please, just one more question. Claire hesitated beside the table while rain tapped softly against the windows behind her. Adrian looked up at her carefully and asked, if someone actually listened this time, where would you start? Claire remained standing beside the table while people moved around them carrying warm drinks and laughing softly beneath the dim golden lights of the coffee shop. Adrian's question lingered in the air between them. If someone actually listened this time, where would you start? She should have walked away. Every instinct told her to protect herself. Powerful men asked questions all the time without wanting real answers. But there was something unsettlingly sincere in Adrian's expression, like he was asking for more than company feedback. Like he genuinely wanted to understand how something inside his world had broken. Claire slowly sat back down. Adrian relaxed slightly, though his face revealed almost nothing. She looked toward the rain-streaked windows before speaking carefully. I would start with the people everyone ignores. Adrian stayed quiet, letting her continue. Receptionists, assistants, junior coordinators, interns. Claire folded her hands together nervously. People at the bottom spend every day terrified of disappointing someone at the top. Adrian glanced down at the folded resignation letter beside his coffee cup. Fear can increase productivity temporarily, he admitted. That is what executives like to say. Claire gave a tired laugh under her breath. Sure, until people stop sleeping. The honesty of the answer almost made Adrian smile. Almost. Claire noticed the faint movement anyway. It softened him unexpectedly. For the first time since entering the coffee shop, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man carrying invisible exhaustion. Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. How long have you been unhappy there? Claire thought about the question longer than expected. I do not know anymore, she admitted quietly. Maybe I just got used to surviving instead of living. Adrian looked at her carefully after she said it, and Claire instantly regretted being so honest. She reached for her paper cup quickly, pretending sudden interest in the coffee she barely touched. Sorry, that sounded dramatic again. No, Adrian repeated softly. It sounded familiar. Claire looked up slowly. Outside, rain shimmered across the Manhattan streets while headlights blurred into long ribbons of white and gold beneath the storm. The city suddenly felt very far away from their small corner table. Adrian loosened his tie slightly before speaking again. When my father ran this company, he believed exhaustion was proof of loyalty. Claire listened quietly. He used to sleep in his office 4 nights a week. Adrian's eyes drifted briefly toward the window. One morning, I found him collapsed beside his desk. Claire's expression softened immediately. I am sorry. Adrian nodded once, but the sadness behind his eyes remained. After he died, I promised myself I would build something better. He looked down at the resignation letter again. Lately, I am not sure I succeeded. Silence settled gently between them. Claire suddenly understood something important. Adrian Whitmore was not meeting her because of a mistaken email anymore. He was searching for proof that his company had not become the very thing he once hated. The realization made her strangely sad for him. Adrian's phone buzzed again against the table. Another board call. Another crisis waiting somewhere high. Above the city. This time he powered the phone completely off. Claire stared at him in surprise. Do you always ignore your board of directors? Only when someone more important is talking. The words escaped before Adrian could soften them. Claire blinked at him, caught off guard. A faint trace of embarrassment crossed Adrian's face immediately afterward, as if even he realized how personal the conversation had become. To break the tension, Claire looked around the coffee shop nervously. This place is nice. Adrian glanced around too. I come here when I want people to leave me alone. Claire laughed quietly for the first time all evening. The sound surprised both of them. Warm. Genuine. Adrian stared at her a second longer than he should have, because suddenly he understood something dangerous. Claire Monroe looked different when she forgot to be afraid. Then his expression shifted slightly as another thought entered his mind. Tomorrow, he said carefully. I want to visit your department. Claire frowned immediately. Why? Adrian's gray eyes stayed locked on hers. Because I think your resignation letter was not the only warning I missed. Claire barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the conversation at the coffee shop over and over again. Adrian's quiet voice, the exhaustion hidden beneath his calm expression, the impossible fact that the billionaire owner of Whitmore Global had listened to her more carefully in one evening than her own managers had in 4 years. By morning, rain clouds still hung low above Manhattan, turning the city gray and heavy. Claire stood inside the crowded subway gripping a paper cup of burnt coffee while anxiety twisted painfully in her stomach. Adrian said he wanted to visit her department. He did not explain how. He did not explain why. And somehow that uncertainty felt worse than anything else. When she stepped onto the 23rd floor at 8:07 a.m., the atmosphere immediately felt different. Tense. Restless. People whispered near cubicles before suddenly going silent when supervisors walked past. Sophie hurried toward Claire carrying 2 folders against her chest. Did you hear? She whispered nervously. Claire frowned. Hear what? The executive team is coming today. Claire's heartbeat stumbled once. What? Sophie nodded quickly. Apparently somebody from headquarters filed an internal complaint. Claire looked away immediately before her reaction became obvious. Everybody is freaking out, Sophie continued softly. Mr. Landon has been yelling since 7 this morning. Right on cue. Daniel Landon stormed out of his office holding a tablet in one hand and a half-finished coffee in the other. Nobody leaves their desk today unless I approve it first, he snapped across the floor. And if anyone is behind on campaign revisions, fix it now. Employees lowered their eyes instantly. Claire hated how normal that fear looked now. At 9:12 a.m., the private executive elevator opened near the center of the office. Silence spread across the entire floor almost immediately. Claire looked up from her computer screen and felt her stomach tighten. Adrian Whitmore stepped out wearing a charcoal suit and dark navy overcoat, followed by several executives carrying tablets and folders. He looked colder here than he had inside the coffee shop. Sharper. Untouchable. The version of him the world recognized. Conversations died instantly as employees straightened in their chairs pretending to work harder. Daniel Landon rushed forward with an eager smile Claire had never seen before. Mr. Whitmore, we were not informed you would be visiting today. Adrian's expression remained unreadable. That was intentional. His voice cut cleanly through the room. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in a quiet way. Claire watched him carefully from her desk while trying not to look obvious. Adrian barely acknowledged the executives surrounding him. Instead, his eyes moved slowly across the office itself. Exhausted faces. Nervous silence. Half-empty coffee cups beside keyboards. Employees afraid to stop typing even for a second. He noticed everything. Daniel laughed awkwardly. Well, the team has been working very hard lately. Adrian's gaze shifted toward him. I can see that. Something in the answer made Daniel straighten nervously. Then Adrian started walking through the department while executives scrambled behind him taking notes. Claire lowered her eyes toward her computer screen, hoping desperately not to attract attention. But a few seconds later, Adrian stopped directly beside her desk. The entire office seemed to stop breathing. Claire slowly looked up. Adrian's expression softened almost invisibly for one brief second before returning to professional calm. Claire Monroe. Her name sounded different in his voice now. More personal than it should have. Yes, sir. Adrian glanced at the stack of unfinished campaign folders piled beside her keyboard. How late were you here last night? Claire hesitated carefully. Daniel answered before she could speak. Our employees understand occasional overtime is necessary in this industry. Adrian did not even look at him. His eyes remained fixed on Claire, waiting for the truth. Claire swallowed hard beneath the weight of every stare in the office. Around 10, she admitted quietly. Adrian nodded once. Then he noticed something taped beside her monitor. A yellow sticky note written in faded blue ink. Do not forget you are human too. Adrian stared at the note longer than expected. Something shifted behind his eyes. Because suddenly he realized Claire Monroe had been trying to save herself long before anyone else bothered noticing she was drowning. The office stayed unnaturally quiet after Adrian noticed the yellow sticky note beside Claire's monitor. Even the clicking keyboard seemed softer somehow. as if everyone sensed something shifting beneath the polished surface of the department. Adrian looked away from the note slowly before turning toward Daniel Landon. How many employees in this division worked past 8 last night? Daniel forced a quick smile. We are approaching an important launch, so the team has been putting in extra effort. Adrian's expression remained unreadable. That was not my question. A faint tension moved through the office. Claire lowered her eyes toward her desk, suddenly aware that every person nearby was listening without appearing to listen. Daniel cleared his throat. Approximately 14. Adrian nodded once. And how many received overtime? Compensation? Silence. Sophie stopped typing entirely. Somewhere near the printers, someone accidentally dropped a pen. Daniel adjusted his tie nervously. Most salaried employees understand flexibility is expected at this level. Adrian finally turned fully toward him. Calm. Controlled. Cold enough to make the room feel smaller. Expected by whom? Daniel opened his mouth, but no answer came out immediately. Adrian did not raise his voice. Somehow that made the moment worse. Claire watched carefully while executives behind Adrian exchanged uneasy looks and scribbled notes onto tablets. For the first time since joining Whitmore Global, she saw fear directed upward instead of downward. Adrian glanced around the department again before speaking clearly enough for everyone to hear. Fear is not leadership. The words settled heavily across the room. Daniel forced another uncomfortable laugh. Of course, we all value employee well-being here. Adrian's gaze sharpened instantly. Then why are your employees terrified to speak honestly? Nobody moved. Claire could almost feel hearts racing around her. Because everyone knew the answer already. They lived it every day. Adrian stepped closer to Claire's desk again, his eyes landing briefly on the stack of campaign folders beside her keyboard. Who handled the Henderson revisions after Claire left last night? Daniel hesitated too long. Adrian noticed immediately. I asked a simple question. One of the junior supervisors near the back finally spoke up quietly. Mr. Landon reassigned the files around midnight, sir. Daniel shot the man a furious look, but the damage was already done. Adrian absorbed the information without visible reaction. Then he looked at Claire again. And this morning you were blamed for the errors publicly. It was not a question. Claire swallowed carefully beneath the attention surrounding them. It is fine. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. No, it is familiar. The answer surprised even Claire, because suddenly she understood he was not only talking about her anymore. He was talking about himself too. About years spent watching powerful people protect systems instead of people. Adrian straightened, slowly before addressing the entire floor. Every employee in this department will leave by 6 p.m. tonight. Shock flickered across multiple faces immediately. Starting next week, all overtime approvals will be reviewed directly through executive compliance. Daniel's face paled slightly. Adrian continued calmly. And if anyone here feels unsafe reporting workplace treatment, my office will provide direct confidential access. Nobody spoke. Nobody even blinked. Because for the first time, somebody powerful was saying out loud what employees whispered about in bathroom stalls and late-night subway rides home. Adrian looked toward Claire one final time before stepping back. Ms. Monroe. Claire stood automatically. Yes, sir. Adrian's expression softened almost invisibly again. Thank you for your honesty. Then he turned and walked toward the executive elevator while stunned silence followed him through the department. The moment the doors closed behind him, the entire office seemed to exhale at once. Conversations exploded quietly across cubicles. Sophie rushed toward Claire wide-eyed. What just happened? Claire stared at the elevator doors, still trying to process everything herself. Across the room, Daniel Landon watched her with an expression that made her stomach tighten immediately. Cold. Humiliated. Angry. Claire suddenly realized something dangerous. Adrian Whitmore may have protected her today, but powerful men rarely embarrassed other powerful men without consequences. Claire spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to focus on spreadsheets while tension spread through the office like static electricity before a storm. Nobody worked normally anymore. Employees whispered in corners. Supervisors suddenly spoke too politely. Even Daniel Landon stayed inside his glass office for nearly 2 straight hours, slamming drawers and making frantic phone calls behind closed blinds. Claire tried not to look at him, but she could feel his anger from across the floor like heat from an open fire. By 5:40 p.m., most employees were already shutting down computers, still stunned by Adrian's order that everyone leave by 6. Sophie approached Claire quietly while pulling on her coat. "I have worked here 11 months, she whispered. "And this is the first time anyone from corporate acted like we mattered." Claire forced a small smile, though uneasiness still sat heavily in her chest. Because deep down she knew today changed something dangerous. Systems built on fear rarely forgave people who exposed them. After Sophie left, the office slowly emptied until only a handful of lights remained glowing across the floor. Claire gathered her folders carefully, hoping to leave unnoticed, but the moment she stepped toward the elevators, Daniel's voice stopped her cold. "Claire, my office." Now. Her stomach tightened instantly. The glass office suddenly felt smaller than ever once the door shut behind her. Daniel stood near the window, overlooking Manhattan, jaw tense, expensive suit wrinkled from stress. For several seconds he said nothing at all. Then he turned slowly toward her. "How long have you been communicating with Adrian Whitmore?" Claire blinked in shock. "What? Do not play innocent with me." His voice stayed low, but anger pulsed beneath every word. "You think I did not notice the way he looked at you today?" Claire crossed her arms tightly. "I accidentally emailed him my resignation letter." Daniel laughed once under his breath. Cold. Disbelieving. Accidentally. Claire suddenly felt exhausted all over again. "I did not ask for any of this." "No." Daniel snapped quietly. "But you enjoyed it." The accusation hit harder than she expected, because part of her already feared the same thing, that everyone would assume she manipulated her way into Adrian's attention. Daniel stepped closer to his desk, lowering his voice even further. "People like Adrian Whitmore do not care about employees like us, Claire. You are useful to him right now because you made him feel like some heroic savior." Claire stared at him silently, while anger slowly replaced fear inside her chest. "That is not true." Daniel's expression hardened. "Then tell me something honestly." He leaned forward slightly. "What happens when he gets bored?" The question lingered painfully in the silence between them. Claire hated that a small part of her wondered. The same thing. Because billionaires return to penthouses eventually. Women like Claire returned to overdue rent notices and crowded subway rides home. Daniel saw uncertainty flash across her face and softened his tone immediately. "I am trying to protect you." Claire shook her head slowly. "No, you are trying to protect yourself." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel's face changed completely. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in a different way now. "Be careful, Claire." Her pulse quickened slightly. "What does that mean?" Daniel picked up a folder from his desk and slid it toward her. Claire looked down and felt her blood run cold. Printed screenshots. Her resignation email. Every vulnerable sentence she wrote at 2:41 in the morning. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Daniel's eyes stayed locked on hers. "You would be amazed what circulates through executive channels." Panic tightened around Claire's chest instantly. That email was private. Nothing is private inside this company. Claire stared at the printed pages with horror rising inside her. Every fear, every breakdown, every humiliating truth she trusted to one accidental moment. Exposed. Daniel watched her carefully before speaking one final time. "You embarrassed the wrong people, Claire." Then her phone buzzed suddenly inside her coat pocket. One new message from Adrian. "I think somebody leaked your resignation letter. Do not leave the building alone."